So I am going to kick it off. Good evening, everybody who's tuned in, quote unquote, to this. Right now, we have 2 of the 5 DC Council candidates who had agreed to appear on this forum. Alphabetically, Will Merrifield and Eric Rogers. And we have more people moderating the panel than we have candidates. We have Randy Speck, who is the chair of ANC 3G/4, who's serving as our timekeeper. And the ANC is one of the co-sponsors. And I, as the past president of the Shepherd Park Citizens Association, representing the SPCA in co-sponsorship. And I'm going to throw this over to Robert Gordon, who is the president of the Chevy Chase Citizens Association. The CCCA is the 3rd co-sponsor of this forum. Robert, it's all yours.
Okay, so let me just give you the normal rules of the road. Normally, our opening statements, which we'd like you to give us your essentially short elevator pitch, is usually 1 minute, but I think we can extend that to 90 seconds today. The Q&A will be done in alphabetical order, although that it's a little, that's pretty easy to do. Answers should be limited to about 1 minute. You'll be able to see that on the timer. The questions are not designed to be gotcha questions. We're really here to learn about you, learn about your attitudes, your thoughts about various issues that are particularly important to our communities. So, and then at the end of the questions, we have something like 8 questions. There'll be a closing statement that can also be 1.5 minutes. And then we'll simply wrap it up. So with that, in alphabetical order, I'd like to have Will Merrifield tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thank you. Yeah, my name is Will Merrifield. I've been, for the last 8 years, I've been a housing attorney at the Washington Legal Clinic for the Homeless. And at the legal clinic, my job was to represent tenant associations across Washington, D.C., going through large-scale redevelopment projects. So I fought on the front lines with tenants to make sure that they weren't displaced through these projects and that affordable housing was preserved. Now, in doing that work, unfortunately, I've seen that too often our local elected leaders are working hand in glove with very politically connected developers and giving them hundreds of millions of dollars of our taxpayer money and public land to build luxury units that working class people cannot afford. It's driving up rents, it's causing displacement, and we're dealing with a family homelessness issue on the back end of it. I'm running a campaign in opposition to that. I'm running on a program to build truly affordable mixed income housing that actually pays for itself. It's a model called social housing, which I hope to talk to you about more tonight. I'm running on a jobs program to put people back to work post-pandemic, to build the thousands of units of social housing infrastructure necessary to get us out of this crisis and to get people back to work, put money in people's pockets, get it recycling back into the economy in a very Keynesian way. And lastly, I live in Deanwood. It's a very working class neighborhood. It's very important to my neighbors that their children have a good neighborhood public school. So I want to be laser focused in investing back in neighborhood public education, especially east of the river.
Thank you, Will. And Eric Rogers, same question.
Thank you. Hi, folks. My name's Eric Rogers. I'm a native Washingtonian. Like Will, I live in Ward 7 in the Hillcrest neighborhood of Ward 7. I think I bring, a wealth of experience and knowledge about DC government and how it operates and how we can solve some of our problems, some of our more pressing problems. A bit of history about myself. I started my career in government as a legislative assistant to the Ward 6 City Council member Sharon Ambrose. I was chief of staff to Council member Kevin Chavis, the chair of the Education and Libraries Committee at the time. Also, I worked over a decade in senior leadership roles at the Department of Consumer and Regulatory Affairs, where I was the Deputy Director for Business and Professional Licensing. So all professional licenses, non-health related, and all business licenses in the city were issued through my program that I oversaw. Mayor Bowser appointed me taxi cab commissioner in 2005 and was also appointed chief of staff at DSLBD. I take all of that time to explain that no matter what the issue the city is facing, we're going to need somebody that has an understanding of the local budget, how it operates, local contracting, how it operates, regulations, how they operate, to effectuate any change that folks think that we need. So I bring that experience to the table and look forward to the conversation.
Thank you, Eric. Mark, you have the first question.
That's right. Just to warn the candidates, Robert and I will be trading off questions. And this first question is really 3 questions. Do your children attend DC public schools? What's your strategy for achieving educational equity without pitting parts of the city against each other? And under what circumstances should teachers and students go back to school? Will, you're first.
Yeah, I do not have children. I was just married in January, so no children yet. You know, how do we invest in a robust public education? I think that what we should strive for as a society, as living in one of the richest regions and the wealthiest country in the world, is to have a robust public education system that equips children to get to college or to have a trade by the time they graduate high school. I believe that when a kid's in 8th or 9th grade, they should sit down with a guidance counselor and they should have a roadmap printed out for them that says, hey, if you want to go to college, here's a way where we can go. You can go to college at UDC for free if you want to go that route. If you want to explore another route, here are things that we can train you in trades to get you a job after college. So I think it's essential that we reinvest in public education, that we move away from a testing model more towards a critical thinking model and being able to prepare children as they graduate to take that next step, whatever it may be.
Eric?
Okay, thank you. Unfortunately, I don't have any children. Working on it with my wife. So check with me in a few months, maybe so, maybe not. And I'm the son of a DCPS educator. So public education to me is critically important. I take a slightly different tact. I'm looking at a decade of growth that we need to achieve for all of our students. And I look at the social indicators that show that students or young adults with college degrees have more earning potential than folks who have a high school diploma. So one of the things that I've been pushing for if elected is to change our educational model away from a high school diploma to an associate's degree. So you will actually graduate, when you graduate, you'll graduate with an associate's degree. It gets to some of the things that Will was saying to ensure that kids are career or college ready, but they need that credential to compete in today's job market. So one of the first things that I would be doing is working with the State Board of Education, the Office of State Superintendent, and the Deputy Mayor for Education to see how we can expand on the pilot program Mayor Bowser's done over here in Ward 7 with Bard College to ensure that kids graduate with an associate's degree.
Thank you, Eric. So I have the next question up, and we'll start with Eric on this one. What's your strategy to support small businesses in DC, which have been devastated by COVID shutdowns? Have you ever met a private sector payroll?
Yes, I have met a private sector payroll, number one. Again, just as most of you know, I've worked with small businesses for most of my career. One of the things that I think that we definitely need to do is, increase our access to capital. I created a microloan fund called District Capitalized at the Department of Small Local Business Development to help young entrepreneurs start and existing businesses grow and maintain their operations. I think using some of the federal money that the Department of Insurance, Securities and Banking, as well as some of the philanthropy, that DSLB can acquire through different types of programming, we can create a fund that small businesses in the city can access to kind of create our own local PPPP. Over the long term, we're going to definitely have to look at some restructuring of our business taxes. We're going to have to look at some restructuring of how we collect some of our taxes to see whether or not we could give businesses a cushion as they meet their financial obligations and bring folks back on as the pandemic ends. And I see my time is up.
Thank you, Eric. Will?
Yeah, I guess I'm eating a payroll through this campaign. I do have employees through this campaign. So yes, I have met a payroll. Previously though, my father was a small business owner. So I've seen what that looks like. I think businesses are going to need capital injections. Small businesses are going to need capital injections post-pandemic to be able to reopen. I've talked to a lot of small business owners through this campaign, and what they've told me is even when we do reopen, we're going to be reopening with a skeleton crew. So I think it's going to be essential that we have a jobs program that the district invest in to put people back to work post-pandemic, because I think to support small businesses, people are going to have the ability to spend money. And if we have mass unemployment, people will not have the ability to spend that money. So I believe we need to take a Keynesian approach to this. Put money in people's pockets. I think that will allow small businesses to recover quickly because, people have money to spend. And lastly, I'll just say that I guess that's my time. But.
Thank you.
Mark, I'm wondering whether we can extend the question answers from 60 seconds to 90, since it seems like our candidates have a little more to say. What do you think?
I'm good with that.
Can I finish that last thought real quickly?
Sure, go ahead.
And you can finish that thought.
Very quickly, I think it's also essential that we bring down costs for small businesses, and I think that means bringing down rental costs for small businesses. I have a social housing plan that involves that process.
Okay. Next question. This will be Will answering first, then Eric. It's another tripartite question, and before I ask it, I have to let you know that the Shepherd Park Citizens Association and Chevy Chase Citizens Association solicited from their members on their respective listserv questions that could be asked at these forums. And the fact that this question was asked shows the staying power of the issue. Were you in favor of or opposed to Initiative 77, the referendum that was approved by the voters 2 years ago regarding wages for tipped workers? Was the council correct or incorrect in voting to override the wishes of the voters? And if another Initiative 77 style referendum were to appear on the ballot, how would you vote? Will?
Yeah, I was against the council overturning the will of the people, first of all. So as far as the underlying legislation with Initiative 77, I do support one fair wage. I do not believe that it would have prevented people from still making, good tips. However, I think, the argument around Initiative 77 misses the larger point that costs of living in the city are astronomical, way too high. So for a minimum wage worker to afford rent for a 2-bedroom apartment in DC, it's $3,100 a month. That works out to about $38,000 a year. Minimum wage worker makes $32,000 a year. So I think that we have to move the conversation to reducing housing costs and reducing cost of living for workers in Washington, D.C. I do, have sympathy for small business owners that said, hey, if we raise this wage, we're not going to be able to meet payroll and we'll have to lay people off. So I understand that aspect of it. In studying the issue when, while it was happening and studying what's happened in California and places where they did have one fair wage, I did not see evidence that it closed a lot of eateries or that people weren't able to be tipped anymore. So I do support the underlying legislation and obviously was against overturning it.
Thank you. Eric, your turn.
For me, I'm on the other side. I worked that issue during that campaign in various capacities. And as a regulator, a former regulator at DCRA, one of the things that I learned is you got to listen to the folks who are most impacted. And when the workers said that this particular piece of legislation, Initiative 77, impacted them poorly, I had to support them. Coupled with the fact that the district government doesn't do a good job in enforcing its wage laws. Right now, even before Initiative 77, any tip worker is guaranteed a minimum wage if they don't make it in their tips. So the argument that I thought was kind of suspicious or specious was, folks were losing out on money, and they're not. You have bad operators, don't get me wrong, and that's where the Department of Employment Services needs to enforce the existing laws appropriately, and then we wouldn't have that issue. As it relates to the council overturning the decision, this is the one time that I do believe the council did the right thing. When 90 or so % of the workers, from some data that I saw at the campaign during that time, don't support a particular issue, I do feel it's wrong for the government to impose its will, or individuals to impose their will on a group who are most impacted. So in this particular instance, I do feel the council made the right decision to protect our workers and to protect our existing regulatory structure so that it's fair. In my mind, it's more fair.
Thank you. The next question, will start out. The mayor has set a goal of adding significant amounts of affordable housing in Ward 3 and the westernmost part of Ward 4. What is your view of adding workforce housing west of the park, and what would you do to make that a reality?
Yeah, I support obviously adding workforce housing west of the park. I don't think the mayor's plan is going to add a lot of workforce housing. I know what it says, but I believe that it's furthering giving away our taxpayer dollars to developers, asking them to build, and at some point thinking that this is going to trickle down and will solve the affordable housing crisis. I don't think it's going to happen. I have an affordable housing plan called social housing. It's based on a successful international model. We're basing our model off the model in Vienna, Austria specifically, where they've come very close to achieving a human right to housing. Social housing is mixed income housing that pays for itself. The way it works is that the locality builds housing. That housing is non-means tested. It's open to anybody. People pay 30% of their rent as renters in this housing. Because we've essentially eliminated the profit motive, 100% of the rent is used productively. It's invested back into the building. At the end of the month, what would have been a profit for the developer turns into a surplus for the building. That surplus is actually used to pay off construction costs. So I believe that, yes, we should build workforce housing. It should be done through a social housing model. When I referenced social housing previously with respect to small businesses, the ground floor retail in these social housing projects would be for small businesses with rents much more affordable than they pay at the base of these luxury units right now. And that smaller rent would still go a long way to cover operating costs. Lastly, it would be a jobs program to put people back to work, a WPA-style jobs program, building a social housing infrastructure to solve our affordable housing crisis and get people back to work.
Thank you, Will. And Eric, same question.
Yeah, I do support Mayor Bowser's goal, or the goal of creating more affordable housing in your neighborhood and in other parts of the city. I have a slightly different tack than Will, though. Some of his ideas are intriguing, and I'm just questioning on how we can do some of that. But one of the things that I'm going to keep harping on in a lot of these questions is using the existing infrastructure that we have and using it most effectively. One of the issues in this campaign is how affordable housing is generated, how housing production trust funds or dollars are used. And as Will mentioned, some of the profit motive in how we as the consumer, in this instance of taxpayer dollars, receive that product being affordable housing. And one of the things that if I'm elected that I'm going to do is really look at how our housing production framework is constructed. You have 3-4 different agencies that deal with housing in the city, from the Department of Housing and Community Development, the Housing Finance Agency, the Deputy Mayor's Office for Planning and Economic Development, all of which have an interplay in the creation of affordable housing. And what we need is a singular government structure that focuses solely on housing, whether it be creation of affordable housing, the preservation of affordable rental housing, or the creation of below certain income level housing, really low income housing and the like. And I think the city, through all of its housing structures, agencies, does a piss poor job in maintaining and managing itself and ensuring that our dollars we get the result that we need from our dollars.
Thank you, Eric. Mark?
Our next question, Eric will answer first, followed by Will. The council has scheduled hearings for November 12 and 13 on the mayor's proposed amendments to the district's comprehensive plan. What questions do you have about the proposed comprehensive plan changes that you think the council should consider? And do you think the council should take a vote on the proposed amendments this year before new council members take office in January? Eric?
Very familiar with the comp plan process, went through it when I worked in the council, so I have kind of a skewed view from the council's perspective. But I do think, to answer the second part of the question first, I do think the council should wait until the new members are selected through this election, and then the new period starts. One of the things that's most interesting to me in the comp plan, especially in the land use element, is the density issue, especially the density issue where I live in Ward 7. I live in a neighborhood that's similarly constructed to your neighborhood, and there's a lot of push to increase the density over here for obvious reasons. And I don't feel that residents in Ward 7 and residents east of the river specifically had enough say-so in the process for the comprehensive plan. And I wish our elected members on this side of the city had taken a more active role in doing some of the due diligence, doing some of the analysis, and looking through some of the research as it relates to some of the density issues over here, which will impact you guys as well, because we're a formerly R1 neighborhood where I live. So it's a similar structure, similar housing structure there. So that's what I would expect the council to do. And I would have a lot of questions again on density issues, especially as it relates to increasing land use elements over here east of the river.
Okay, Will, you're up.
Yeah, I would not support a vote until new council members take office. And I think that the comprehensive plan amendments has been a deeply flawed process. There's been hearings held on this where the community has made their voices heard, that they want more input in that process. And they've been, shut out of that. I believe that this is the council working with developers to amend the plan to eliminate community input and build more dense projects. Now, I'm an unabashed lefty, so I am completely I'm not against density for density's sake. I want to build affordable housing. It is the anchor of my platform, is to build a bunch of it in a decommodified nature. However, the idea that we should remove community input from the zoning process, I believe, is very flawed. And the idea that we should just let developers essentially run wild and build more dense housing, and that will solve the affordable housing crisis, is a grift. It has not worked. Where density increases, a lot of times the price of all of the housing increases and people get displaced. It's a manifest destiny approach to development to inject a ton of capital into a neighborhood, build for people that aren't currently living there, and push out those that are currently living there. So I believe that it's a flawed process. We should push back against it. We should build affordable housing from the ground up, not from, not build housing from the top down and think that private developers are going to save us.
Thank you. This next question was not part of our original questions. It popped up on the Chevy Chase listserv, but it's certainly one that's important in this neighborhood and especially to me. And I'd like Eric to start on this. Elderly residents in our neighborhood are looking to the council for a greater level of senior services. Your thoughts and what would you do? And we got this question several times on our listserv.
Wonderful question. And, I'm very sensitive to that government needs to take care of all citizens. So my mom's 80 years old and, we've gone through some experiences over the last couple of years as she's aged. And one of the things that it's made me realize is the need for, as you're asking the question, more senior services. I definitely support intergenerational programming. Like I said, my mom's a former DC public school teacher, and one of the things that I found that's most keeps her more engaged in life beyond, being my mother, is tutoring and working with kids in her neighborhood and helping them during this transition, during the pandemic, and doing a lot of distance learning and helping them to catch up. I've seen a spark in her that I haven't seen, I guess, since she's worked. So it's one thing that I really want to push is to use those community resources that we have in our seniors and our elders and pass that knowledge on in an active and fun and community-driven way. I'm about to be 50, so I understand AARP is sending me all types of things that I didn't even think I should be getting. But we do have to realize that this is a city for all. It's not just for the young, and it's not just for the hip and the speedsters. We do need to look out for our elder population and incorporate them in our new growth.
Thank you. So Will, same question.
Yeah, this is an issue that's really, really close to my heart because for the last 7 years, I've been the Tenant Association president at a place called Brooklyn Manor. And it's a bunch of deeply affordable housing that sits on 22 acres of land in Northeast DC, right up the street from the Rhode Island Avenue Metro. And what Brooklyn Manor has right now, which is missing in a lot of other parts of the district, is large bedrooms. And there was a development plan put forward to demolish Brooklyn Manor and eliminate the large bedrooms there. And what the outcry from the residents is that you had a lot of grandmothers living in intergenerational families at Brooklyn Manor. And there was, the developer said, well, we'll build a senior building. And what a lot of seniors said is, we don't want to live alone in a senior building. We want to live with our families. As my daughter goes to work, I watch the kids because, childcare is a very expensive issue in the city. So I really identify with what Eric said. I think that seniors, it's important for them to be, in the community and also able to age in a way that they want. And a lot of seniors in Washington, D.C. want to age with their families, and they're not given that opportunity because of the extraordinary cost of living. So I think we have to do a better job of integrating seniors and making sure there's housing available that fits their needs.
Thank you.
Very good. Thank you. I ask the next question. Will go first, followed by Eric. What is the single most important issue that you would champion as council member? Will?
Everybody might have an inkling to what I'm going to say, but it is affordable housing. I believe, I've worked for the last 10 years at the legal clinic. I've had the answer once a week. when I was at the legal clinic before I decided to run, once a week, one of the attorneys has to answer every call that comes in. And for the entirety of my career at the legal clinic, I was answering calls from single mothers living in their cars with their children, not just trying to access housing, but actually trying to access shelter. So that is a moral failure on the part of the District of Columbia. And I believe that what we're doing, I don't know that ordinary Washingtonians understand to the extent to which we are subsidizing this luxury development that is causing this displacement. So it's immoral, but it's also wrongheaded just from an economic perspective, because we're paying for this family homelessness crisis on the back end of things. Children aren't able to be properly educated because their life is chaotic. They're constantly going through evictions and destabilizations in their housing, and health becomes a real issue. The housing stock that they are able to get into is unsafe and unhealthy, and parents can't hold down jobs when they don't have stable housing. So this issue touches on everything. It really hurts people, has a direct impact on their lives, and then we as taxpayers pay for things on the back end in a reactionary manner instead of making sure that we have an equitable city where everybody can thrive.
Thank you, Will. Eric, it's your turn.
Will actually kind of hit on the general theme that, that's just a bugaboo with me, and it's just government operations in general. It's ensuring that the government does what it says it's going to do. One thing that's taught me that I've learned in this campaign is that there are a multitude of ideas on how to solve many challenges. I'm an expert in some, I'm not an expert in others, but the one key thing that links all of those ideas together is the efficient operation of the government, that we do what we say that we're going to do. Being a former regulator at DCRA, I understand the impact when the government doesn't do what it says that it's going to do. And I see that more, in my neighborhood when it comes to jobs. So if there's a secondary single issue that I'm really focused on beyond government operations and ensuring our dollars are spent effectively on whatever the program that we collectively have decided is jobs. Everyone needs a good economic opportunity, and it distresses me when I look at the Department of Employment Services and some of the services that they give residents. And then I hear from those residents, okay, I took the job training program, I did the resume building, I did the interview skills, and I still can't get a job. What am I doing wrong? It hurts me because they're not doing anything wrong. What we haven't done as a government is give you, through thoughtful consideration and data, the skills that you need to go get the job that are out there. And so it's making sure that the government does what it's supposed to do. So it's a cross-sectional approach, but employment, if I had to focus on a singular issue, would be employment.
Thank you. So next question.
It's yours.
It's mine.
To ask.
This is a short one. What committee would you like to chair or sit on?
Oof.
And that'd be Eric.
What I would love to chair is the Finance and Revenue Committee, because as you can hear from my theme, we got to spend our dollars right. And I would be a bear to get a lot of things through. Again, understanding that there are a lot of great ideas from the 24 or so candidates who are running, plus the sitting members, but how are we going to pay for it? Last council period, or I think over the last couple of council periods, we implemented laws that have almost $1 billion in fiscal impact, but they're subject to appropriations. But yet at the same time, agencies are still obligated to, carry out those mandates. And that's inefficient government, because the expectation from government is one thing, but the reality for government to deliver is another. Definitely the Finance and Revenue Committee. Our revenues are down. There's no getting around it. The pandemic has decimated our budget, compared to the last 4, 5, 6 years or so. So we're going to need someone there who can say no and who can make those tough decisions. Luckily, working in government for the last 20 years or so, I've negotiated with the mayor, I've negotiated with city administrators, other members, depending on where I was working, to get whatever funding we needed for a particular project. But I understand the interplay of our finances and the interplay of policy choices on our finances. So that would be the committee that I would like.
Thank you. And Will?
Yeah, I mean, finance and revenue is very interesting to me as well. I think that coming out of the pandemic, we are going to be in an era where there's going to be a lot of local leaders, promoting austerity politics. And I think that we are going to have to push back against that. I know that a lot of the recovery is going to have to come at the federal level. And we need to push at the federal level, but I think locally we are going to have to continue to inject money into this economy, and we're going to have to do it again in a Keynesian way. Like Eric was talking about before, I completely agree with him. A jobs program. I think it was Byron Rustin, talked about every able-bodied person that wants to work should be able to work. And I think the district locally has a role to play, and through the finance and revenue, we make it, you can find the money to do that. But again, probably won't surprise anybody, the Committee on Housing and Neighborhood Revitalization. My work as a housing attorney for the last 8 years at the legal clinic, I think that I have a very clear understanding of the holes in our housing policy, that we are subsidizing this luxury development at the top end. We're also, which I don't know that people understand, we are subsidizing with our tax dollars a subprime slumlord market on the bottom end, and we're leaving a big donut hole in the middle. So I would love to get on that committee and tackle those issues as well.
Thank you.
Robert, if with your permission and that of our other moderator, there is an enterprising attendee who put in 3 questions in the Q&A section of the toolbar at the bottom. They're somewhat disparate questions, so this would be a bit of a lightning round. You'd get 90 seconds, but they are 3 separate topics. So we'll take Eric first again, and then follow with Will. The 3 questions are: is there a topic that you'd like to hold a hearing on? The second question: is there a law that you want to repeal? If so, what? The third question is there a city agency that you believe is not living up to its mandate? And if so, how would you reshape it?
Interesting questions. So to get into the nitty gritty, yes, I'll answer number 3 first. I would have to look at my old agency, DCRA, and not for probably some of the more popular reasons, but understanding how DCRA works and some of the effects of legislative proposals over the last 10 years and how it's actually kind of dismembered the agency. I would really love to tackle, and this would also answer the question for the hearing, how our licensing structure and our regulatory structure is framed, and what changes that we can make to that regulatory structure in the future. Not necessarily being business friendly, not necessarily being consumer friendly. It's looking at both sides and figuring out what we want. What does the business community need for efficient operations without as much government interference that's there, but also what do consumers need to ensure that their rights are being preserved and we have some form of consumer protection. You don't have bad business practices. So that would be a wonderful topic, that a series of hearings looking at how we would do that, as well as community and economic development. I would love to have a hearing on that. It ties into an idea I have for a new Department of Housing, because you would have to carve off some of our community development aspects from DEMPED and from DHCD. And how would that look? How does neighborhood development look beyond some of the scattershot programs that we have that pop up every now and again in the city?
Okay, Will, again, the questions: a topic you'd like to hold a hearing on, a law that you want to repeal, if so, what? And is there a city agency you believe is not living up to its mandate? And if so, how would you reshape it?
Yeah, the issue that I'd like to hold a hearing on is how many developers have broken promises and broken covenants, have gotten taxpayer money and promised jobs for DC residents or affordable housing delivered through their projects. There are, to give you the answer to that question, I mean, you'd have a ton of people that broke those covenants. There was a great series that WAMU did a couple years back called Deals for Developers that detailed the amount of public subsidy developers got, the promise they made for it, the breaking of the promise, and then the timing of the campaign contribution to the council member who proposed the legislation, giving them the taxpayer money. So I think that would be a great hearing to have and hold developers accountable. I would, DHCD is an agency that I think is not holding up its end of the bargain to the public. They're not keeping track of covenants. And I think they're way too beholden to, you know, the type of top-down development in DC. And a lot of this should be repealed. I don't know one that, I can't think of one that should be repealed, but I'd love to enact clawback legislation to make sure that if a developer or a contractor gets government money, doesn't comply, that the district has the ability to claw back those subsidies and recapture those subsidies for the taxpayer.
Okay.
We have, thank you. We have another few questions that are rolling in. This is an interesting one. What is your position on the city's current marijuana laws? Will you take a shot at that?
Yeah, you know, I'm for full legalization of marijuana. I believe that marijuana is used by many people medicinally. I think that marijuana is a much less harmful drug than, say, alcohol. I'm for, you know, full legalization of marijuana. I think it's caused a lot of people a lot of harm in the city. You know, in my neighborhood in Deanwood, you know, jump out squads will throw kids up against the side of a building and you know, pat them down, stop and frisk, you know, to fighting this idiotic war against marijuana. So I'm for full legalization.
Eric?
Yeah, you know, have a similar view as well for most illegal drugs, and it's not because I feel that, you know, feel some sympathy, to be honest with you, and I probably shouldn't say this, because of the medicinal purposes. You know, that's a small fraction of the folks that want to use it or use it. It's just an excuse, you know, in my mind, just an excuse. But the main reason why is I look at the war on drugs. I look at the impact that the war on drugs have had on Black communities, the incarceration rates, you know, based off of simple possession of marijuana or at the disparate treatment between crack cocaine and powder cocaine and so on and so forth, that I think that as a government, we need to get out of some of our puritanical beliefs. As long as the behavior or the person's behavior doesn't negatively impact the greater society, and I'm not talking about addiction, but I'm talking about just typical day-to-day behavior, you know, let people be who they are. And it's not a place for the government to step in and use our criminal justice system to try to enforce a particular view of human behavior. With that said, I do think that if folks can't control themselves and they do step out of line, especially if they step out of line violently, then we do need to allow our criminal justice system to step in. But for the simple possession, simple recreational use, you know, we're wasting too many dollars, you know, public safety dollars, to try to impact an issue that you will never have an impact on because it's just human nature.
Thank you. We've got another question submitted by an attendee with a point of view, and it goes like this. We'll go with Eric first and Will second. How would you diversify revenue streams for DC besides tripling the number of traffic cameras?
The best way to diversify the revenue stream in DC is to invest in jobs. The more people we have making more money, it means more income taxes, it means folks are buying houses, which means we're getting increased property taxes. They have more disposable income. means our small businesses are reopening. That means our small businesses are increasing their sales taxes, and the other folks who are spending the money are paying for sales taxes. So one of the ways that I would increase for the long term, because a lot of the ideas that you may have heard in the past are short-term ideas. We need to invest in our people, and we need to ensure that the income levels of all of us, whether you're at the top income or the moderate or the low income, are rising. I do believe in rising tides lift all boats. So that's one way where I would put my tax dollars as an investment. Second, I would invest in education. It's a longer term investment, but the more money we put in education, the less money we put in criminal justice issues. So if kids are graduating with, as I hope so, an associate's degree and are on a correct path, they're least likely to go into the criminal justice system. There's no need in us spending $50,000 a year to prosecute someone and house someone when we can spend $30,000 a year and educate that person and then get them into the economic system. So that's how I would diversify our revenue streams. I have plenty of other ideas on technical ways with the property taxes, sales, use taxes, fees, and so on and so forth. But programmatically, that's the best way to do things.
Thank you, Eric. Will?
Well, I could not agree with Eric more on jobs and education. I think that I've said it a couple times tonight. We need a jobs program, put people back to work, get that money recycled back into the local economy. Education, a long-term investment that will pay off in the future. There's some loopholes, some tax loopholes in the tech industry for tech companies that I think we could close that would raise a substantial amount of revenue. And I don't know that this is going to be popular, but I do believe coming out of the pandemic, we are going to have to raise income taxes on people. I'm proposing to reverse the Trump tax cuts so people wouldn't be paying any more than they were before those Trump tax cuts. And I believe what I've seen from the figures, that would raise about $400 million worth of revenue. So I think that we are going to have to be creative. We are going to have to come up with additional revenue. But again, I think that the key to all of this is that, I don't want people paying higher taxes just to pay higher taxes. I don't want to be a tax and spend person. What I want to do is increase taxes to deal with the pandemic and invest it in programs that will pay off in the future. That is social housing. That is a jobs program. It's a real investment and a reform of our public education system. I am not in the business of just raising taxes to raise taxes, but I think it's going to be a very necessary position that we take post-pandemic.
The next question was also a writing question, and you may have already answered it, Will. I'll read it in its entirety. Will you raise taxes on the wealthy so they pay their fair share, or continue the DC automatic tax cuts that I believe are in law now and the tradition of tax cutting started by Reagan and perfected by Trump?
Yeah, I would raise taxes. I think people have to pay their fair share. We live in a progressive, tax structure, and I do not believe in trickle-down economics. So absolutely, yes, I would support raising taxes.
Eric?
I support raising taxes as long as I know where the money is going. So in this instance, to help plug some of the budget gaps, if we're going to spend additional funds to help students with distance learning and get back into the school, yes, we should raise taxes. If we're going to spend additional money on helping small businesses recover from the pandemic and reinvest in our small business economy, yes, I don't mind raising taxes. But if we're going to start raising taxes to fulfill some propaganda, some policy proposal that has really no bearing on the immediate situation right now, then no, I'm not for that. I need to see where our dollars are going. And any tax increase, especially income tax increase, I would segregate it. I would make sure that it's dedicated to a particular program. So we're trying to ensure that renters are taken care of. Any tax increases or a percentage of the tax increases have to go to that program, not to the general fund. If we're trying to, create our own local PPP for small businesses, then the revenue that we generate from the increased taxes has to go to that particular program. So I'd be very focused on where we spend our money, because one thing that I've realized, well, that I know just through government experience, once you start spreading the money around, the impact of the dollars aren't what folks expect. But they understand, as Will mentioned, maybe you get $400 million in additional revenue, but only $20 million going to our school system, which is over a $2 billion enterprise. That's a drop in the bucket. You're not making a difference in those children's lives. So if we're going to raise taxes, raise it for a specific purpose that we all agree on.
Okay, thank
I
you.
think we have time for one more question.
One more, yes. Last question before we get to closing statements. Very short question. Where do the candidates stand on charter schools? And we'll ask Eric first and Will second.
So I have no bones with charter schools versus traditional public schools. I think the competition is healthy. Like I mentioned earlier, when I started my government career, we were in the midst of the school governance debate, went through several iterations of the school board, as well as the beginnings of starting the charter movement. At the end of the day, I have to look at what is the purpose of a charter school, what is the purpose of a traditional school, and that's to educate our children. If 50% of families have chosen charter schools for a reason, then I need to ensure that those charter schools are operating efficiently. Just the same as for the families who have chosen traditional public schools. So I have no issues with charters. I do think eventually, and I think we're coming to that point now, that there has to be a balance between traditional and public. I don't think each one now should be cannibalizing the other, even though we have an increased enrollment in both. But I do think some slowdown, if you will, in charter growth as it relates to non-performing schools and the new schools that are allowed to come in, that you keep that ratio. I think that's good. As well as supplemental funds for traditional public education to make up for some of the deficiencies that they have because they've lost students, whether that be special education teachers, guidance counselors, behavioral specialists, art teachers, whatever the particular community feels is best for that local education agency. That's what I believe that we should do, on the traditional side. So I think a robust, competitive public education environment is good for the city.
Thank you, Eric.
Will?
Yeah, I do not believe in charter schools. I believe in a traditional, robust public education system. I think that the state that we're in Washington, D.C., where a kid is, essentially entering a lottery to get into a decent school is not a healthy system. I think that when we look around at the states that have adopted the charter school method, their outcomes have not gotten better. A place like New Orleans is not a better education system, that they've privatized and chartered out their whole school system. The charter school movement is promoted and really championed by Betsy DeVos, who I don't believe has the best interest of children in mind. I think that it's a way for, to carve out public dollars that were going to public institutions and privatize those dollars. And so I know that charters right now are a part of the spectrum in DC, and I know there are some good charter schools. I'm not arguing that there aren't good charter schools, but I think in order to look at whether a system is functioning properly, we have to look at the system as a whole and not just individual cases. So I believe in local control and transparency in our school system. The charter schools do not supply that. So I am deeply invested in reinvesting in neighborhood public schools and making sure that every kid has got a really good neighborhood public school to go to. Now, I will say that a public school system is more than just the public school. It is uplifting and making sure a community is taken care of. Because no matter what the curriculum is in a school, no matter how great it is, no matter how great the teachers are, if a child doesn't have stability in their household, if they can't afford healthy food, and if their parents aren't working, it makes it harder for a child to be educated. So I think we have to take a holistic approach to this, but I do believe that returning to a healthy, robust public school model that does not rely on testing as a means to divert funds from one, system into another system is essential for us moving forward.
Well,
Thank you. This is closing
Now
statements.
is it, Mark?
Yes, it's time for closing statements. I know Will went first for the opening statement, so we'll go with Eric first for the closing statements. Mr.
1 minute or
Rogers.
1 minute or a minute and a half.
Minute and a half.
Okay.
1 minute, minute and a half. Okay. Well,
Casual.
thank you guys. I appreciate the conversation. Actually, this is the most fun I've had at a forum because you actually can get complete thoughts out. So I really do appreciate it. But again, my name is Eric Rogers, native Washingtonian, 21-year DC government worker, who's been a public servant serving you. My ideas and my values for the city are simple. Accept people for who they are, build a community of support, and create generational wealth. Everything that I believe in that government can do revolves around those three ideas. There's nothing that we can't do if we don't put our minds to it, obviously. But I'm the type of leader, I'd like to think, that can bring different stakeholders together, listen to ideas, and come up with the best solution. I have a record of doing that. I didn't mention earlier, but some of my work has been recognized by the former president of the United States, President Obama, when the city won an award for our Startup in a Day initiative for small businesses. So I bring that type of competence and experience to the council. I'm not an ideologue. I'm a fair person. I'm a pragmatic person. Like I mentioned earlier, I like to listen to ideas and figure out the best solution for everyone. So if you want someone with 21st century solutions who has 21 years of experience, I'm number 21 on the ballot, and I look forward to your vote.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Merrifield, you're up.
Well, I want to really thank you for hosting this debate and thank everybody for participating. I know with so many candidates, that are in this race, it would have been really easy for you guys to phone it in and not give us an opportunity on this last night. So I really appreciate it. I'm running, like I said, I've worked at the legal clinic for the last 8 years. I've seen that we essentially have two different districts of Columbia. One is a really nice place for people to live, and the other is a place where people are really, truly struggling. I do not think that, that should move forward. And I think that the district is full of really good people that don't want the District of Columbia to be two places. So what I'm running on are policies that try to get underneath why we have these inequities. I'm offering a real solution to the affordable housing crisis. Every politician has talked about this affordable housing crisis as one of their priorities for so long. Like I said, it affects everybody. It affects people at so many different levels. I'm actually offering a solution to it, a solution that gets underneath the problem and that pays for itself. That is the social housing model. It would help small businesses when you get to a human right to housing. So please visit my website, will4dc.com, to learn more about the campaign. And again, thanks for having me tonight.
Well, thank you both very much. Thank you. I appreciate you participating and for your thorough answers. Randy, thank you for your superb timekeeping.
Thank you, sir.
And Mark, it's been a pleasure working with you.
Likewise, I'm sure. And for those taking part or watching this, we will get this posted on YouTube, as we will the first two forums that were conducted on the 10th. They'll probably all be posted at the same time, but don't worry, they'll each be posted separately. So you can watch them 1 hour at a time, pausing as often as you need to. Take it all in.
Well,
Thank you all.
Thank you. And
Thanks,
good evening.
everybody.